hit in terms of losing job, educational opportunities, and even their life. So 61 countries around the world have more than 30% of their urban population living in slums. So living conditions are dramatically affecting the health profiles of the urban poor. So with the pandemic further expanding its reach, every day is now more difficult and more uncertain for these people. So people in informal settlements are more vulnerable due to malnutrition, lower life expectancy, chronic respiratory diseases, and tuberculosis and HIV and AIDS. They have a higher exposure to other diseases associated with weaker hygiene practices, exposure to waste and wastewater, and changing weather conditions and other risks. So the bottom 20% of the poorest urban population living in an informal settlements have a life expectancy that is 15 years shorter than the richer 40% of the urban population. So the COVID-19 pandemic gives visibility to the multiple inequalities, vulnerabilities, form of exclusion and deprivations caused by decades of neglect and underinvestment. People living in informality are invisible. They are not counted in data collection and monitoring, planning, and social services. UN Habitat is working closely with local government in developing countries to offer practical solutions to help cities cope with COVID-19, including scale up rapidly affordable provision of water and sanitation, issue moratoriums on water and electricity charges in partnership with service providers. Third, arrange emergency cash grant and transfer and ensure emergency access to food and water. Fourth is cease all evictions, particularly in cases where individuals cannot pay their rent and have nowhere to go. And fifth, develop distribution network for food, water, and other essential. The sixth, develop strategies for physical distancing in public transport or when queuing for water and food distribution. Seven, decentralize larger main market into micro markets. Number 8, encourage urban agriculture. Number 9, identify existing facilities and could be repurposed or provide temporary low-cost structure as community care facilities. And then establish safe protocol for funerals. Local governments can take the lead to work with communities in informal settlements and all stakeholders to implement preemptive strategies based on area-based risk assessments of residential area. Number 2, ensure worker safety for government workers and all those ensuring basic services. Provide clear information and advice in local languages about COVID-19 and consult community leaders and civil society organizations and ensure their support to replicate successful effort. So let us not focus on what has not been done, but instead turn to what we need to do to ensure that we lay the groundwork for integrated and inclusive citywide responses and recovery. So my friends, 2020 started the decade of action on the implementation of the SDGs. COVID-19 is very unexpected, unplanned global wake-up call for this decade of action. We cannot move beyond the outbreak if people living in informality remain at risk because of insecure tenure and overcrowding, and lack of water and sanitation, and lack of income security and access to social services. So on Monday, the United Nations released its full for after the outbreak, highlighting that we will be no return to the old normal and calling governments to act to create a new economy and more jobs. The UN's immediate socio-economic response to COVID-19 sets out 5 pathways to set in motion a safe recovery of societies and economies. The target is a world that is better than the old normal, more sustainable, more gender equal, and more carbon neutral. One of the 5 pathways is to promote social cohesion and to invest in community-led resilience. This is where local government needs to come out in the forefront for the benefit of people living in informal settlement, working with the informal sector. UN Habitat is working with you to invest in resilience. Every week, twice a week since 25th March, I joined this learning session to ensure that UN Habitat action address the needs. I hear from you. I call on the UN Habitat's country managers to start immediate assistance project in all regions. Last week, I launched the United Nations Habitat or UN Habitat COVID-19 response plan. Ongoing programs are being repurposed, such as the participatory slum upgrading program, which reaches 5 million slum dwellers in 190 cities in 4 key countries. So as the start of this session, allow me to thank once more the thousands of participants who have joined this learning event. I would like to thank UCLG, Emilia, the UCLG members, Metropolis, and the many speakers. With all of you, my support is for local governments who leave no one and no place behind, whether formal or informal. So together, we must overcome COVID-19 and reshape our cities and communities beyond the outbreak. Thank you very much to all of you, and I hope that everybody will stay safe, stay healthy, and with the high spirit. Thank you very much, Emilia. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Maimuna, Executive Director, for these important reflections and already some guidelines, some of the things that we have been discussing in the past that would be needed and that are very applicable concretely for this pandemic. I guess one of the challenges is going to be to ensure that some of the safety measures that we have been taking in the context of the crisis are not only thought about or designed for the formal sector. I think that we need to help shape protocols also for the informal sector, and the partnership with the other stakeholders and communities is very critical in this. So let us hope that we can build this trust together and that we can help to define some of the safety measures. Thank you very much for that. And some people are already asking for you to share those points in the chat. So we will make sure we do that. And it will be also in the briefing of this session. So William Cobbett, the floor is yours. Director of Cities Alliance, and Cities Alliance has dealing with informalities, but also improving the life of those living in informalities in the core of its mandate. Billy, some reflections on how you see that this is going to affect also the work of Cities Alliance in the future and of the members of the floor is yours.
I see I had to unmute myself. Thank you. And thanks to Emilia, thank you very much, and to the co-organizers. And we welcome this focus on informality. As you say, this is in the core business of the Cities Alliance. And as we have the discussion, obviously the focus is on the immediate and the short term, the crisis that's in front of us now. But I really hope that that mayors and city leaders recognize how essential it is that short-term responses are guided by long-term visions of where the city needs to be going, so we don't return to the old normal. And as we know, the urban growth that we see taking place is so often unplanned, it's informal, it's incremental, and results in these large informal settlements in these slums. Now, Emilia, you referred to, and I recognize that, the recognition that in some cases mayors are part of the problem. Let's focus rather on what successful mayors do, because there are many successful mayors around, and that's what we want to endorse and support. Successful mayors recognize that informal areas, what we call them, is in fact their city. It's part of their city. And successful mayors own the whole city and act on all of the people living in that area and call them citizens, all of them. This is the thinking. This is the mind shift. And as I was reflecting on preparing for this, you know, the mind shift we want to, if COVID-19 doesn't discriminate, why do governments? This is where we really have to put our thinking. So successful mayors, how do we measure what a successful mayor is doing? Speeches are nice. More important for the people living in the informal areas, the residents and the workers there, that they're on the map. They're in the city plan. They're part of the medium-term strategy of the city. And above all else, they're on the budget. They're in. That's the test of how change happens. And successful and accountable governments do not use COVID-19 as a cover for forced evictions, for once again attacking the urban poor, workers and settlers. And I really welcome, Emilia, under your leadership, the attention that UCLG has given to this. We know it's not an easy topic, but it is something that these are real and significant abuses of human rights, anti-developmental, and never solve the problem. So we see moving forward, and this is what we must work towards, beyond just the language. What I'm talking about with the successful mayors working with the citizens, that's part of the kind of partnership that we're going to hear today in the presentations between successful local governments and communities. And where, in particular, in the cities in which we work, the most pivotal change is how land is dealt with in those cities. Because the informal settlements, the overcrowding in slums, the resolution to insufficient land is more land, better located land, accessible, affordable land, land that is serviced as a matter of course and not by default, and where people's long-term rights to the city are recognized as citizens. And this is going to be on show today. And we know from all of the evidence, it's locally generated solutions that are the most sustainable and the longest lasting, which is what we provide support to rather than insert ourselves into. So that's the first level, the partnership. The second that needs to change in relationship is between national governments and local and regional governments. And here, national governments have a clear responsibility to provide robust policy frameworks, to be clear about roles and responsibilities, not competing, but sharing within one system. And above all else, in being equitable about the sharing of resources. And the mindset, again, is for national government not to think that they are superior and that sub-regional government is inferior, but they are partners running the same system. That is a big shift that is necessary, and we must support local and regional governments in changing that mindset. And I think ultimately the biggest role in responding to not just the immediacy of COVID-19, but all of the fault lines that the crisis is demonstrating. As good as the mayors can be and as wonderful as some national governments are, most city and national governments do not have the resources, the skills, everything they need to deliver what we say that they need to do. And I see a very significant role for the international community to provide consistent and long-term support that is built around not the import of external skills, but builds and utilizes local skills, local capacity, local initiatives, and that they stay for the long term. We cannot be fixing this in 18 or 20 month or 48-month cycles. This is, can we change this to the long term? The agenda, as the secretary, as the executive director of UN Habitat has already said, the agenda exists. We have the Sustainable Development Goals, which promise to leave no place and no one behind. And if we can green this, then maybe this can be a turn, but that's on the optimistic side. So that's our thinking, that's our approach. It's really, we now have to build these forces. They exist at local level, build on those, We don't need the international community coming in and saving local communities. We'd rather build on initiatives that are already underway. Thank you, Emilia.
Thank you very much, Billy, for these inputs and for trying to set out also the frame of the session into that what we can do. And thinking it from that perspective, I think we will need to make a distinction between the urgency of the emergency,
Yep,
of the crisis, and what we will need to do post-crisis. They are linked. And we will need to ensure, indeed, that some of the measures that we are undertaking are building blocks for that aftermath. But I think it is very important also to take responsibility as international community for the type of help that we will need to offer to some of those that are a victim now because they don't know what to do else. So I think it is important indeed to focus on what can be done, but not to be afraid to also share the frustrations that we have. Is the only way to build the trust, and that's what this platform needs to do. Octavi, very big challenges for many of the very big cities that your organization represents within UCLG. To you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Emilia, and good afternoon from Barcelona to everybody. I think what's interesting of what's happening with COVID and in relation to informal context and informalities is that so far many people were still thinking that informality, it was synonym of unreal, of non-existing. It was a reality that if you were not taken into account, it was not existing. And many mayors were thinking, I remember some time ago in a discussion with a mayor from India saying, well, I'm planning from 500 million inhabitants because those are the ones who are registered. The other ones are not existing, so I'm not taking any decision on that. What is showing us that is that informality is real, and as Billy said, is part of the city, of the whole city. You cannot understand the city if you don't take into account this informal context. And the other point that we are witnessing around in our membership, I think it's happening all around the world, is that we thought that informality was only a thing of the global south. Now, the reality is that we are discovering in Europe, in North America, that informality was already there and is emerging, and if it was not there, now it's happening again. And many people is being pushed to informality and to informal context. And that's something that we need to take into account, and it's related to this idea that we need maybe to rethink the way we are developing and planning our cities. And it's interesting because at the same time as well, we are confronted to these discussions these days. I think is everywhere, in all your countries, in all your cities, this discussion between the confrontation of the dilemma between people's safety and economic livelihoods. And many decisions have been taken from a point of view that informality didn't exist. And so restrictions around movement of people, restrictions in terms of functioning of services, the physical distance, that sometimes is not realistic if you take into account when you have settlements, slums, where you have high densities of population, when you don't have infrastructures, when you don't have access to basic social services, when people cannot be connected to the internet and to work remotely. And on the other hand, we're taking decisions that are not realistic in terms of this other informal reality. And I think this is something that needs to be changed. The other idea is that I think the executive director of UNHabitat also said it is we need to have a holistic approach, because informal economy is related as well to informal housing and with transport, and informal settlements, I mean, brings people who are living in informal settlements, that's the ones normally who are more vulnerable, the ones who normally are working in the informal economy, the ones who don't have access to formal health systems, and so on. So we are being confronted to more exacerbated vulnerabilities, and also it means that we need to approach in a different way what we're doing. And I fully agree with Billy that the land issue is critical. Who owns the land? How as well is developed the land, and also is related how we are developing all the issues related about housing, public space. I mean, one of the most striking images that I had during this pandemic on the TV, and I think it's a quite summary of what we are going to discuss today. I don't know if you see this image of a market in Africa, an informal market in Africa, which was being raided by the police because of sanitary issues related to the COVID-19. And this is quite an example that of the decisions that are confronted by our leadership, and they need to think about these kind of things. So we need to work in terms of how we ensure access to health, access to livelihood, access to opportunities, because otherwise we already had them, but it will be even more citizens of first-class citizens and second-class citizens, or even non-existing citizens. And this is a problem because we have related that everything is interconnected. Now you cannot avoid the reality of having informal settlements, the reality of having people that don't count, or the reality that there is informal economy in your city. And then there's another point that I think I hope this will come in the discussions today, is new approaches to governance, especially when we're tackling the informal context. I mean, we note a lot of things happening in suburbs, the role of the grassroots communities, grassroots organizations. They are really working and kind of working as if they were the local government and providing services, organizing the communities, and so on. So we need to look as well at the way that our leadership and local governments and regional governments are relating to these organizations of the citizens that are already working and even, as I said, delivering services or organizing the communities. That's related as well so at the role that we want to play in the future, the role as well that we want local governments to play not only with these local communities, but as well at the national level. And of course, we need to think which kind of resources and services we need in order to ensure that no one is left behind. So that's all kind of my thoughts I wanted to share today with you. And I think especially, of course, I have a bias because I'm Secretary General of Metropolis, so we're working with the big cities, but especially major cities. I mean, we have an issue there. We have realized that the COVID-19 is striking more those urban agglomerations where there's a high density of population and they are very globalized, interconnected. So as well, it means that we need to rethink certain things that we had in our models of development. So thank you, and I give you over, Emilia.
Thank you very much, Octavi. So, colleagues, I think this gives a quite broad and balanced picture of what the thinking is. It's a little bit preaching to the choir, I feel, because we seem to be getting along fine, but I think we need to pin down some of the difficult things that we are trying to be together and that we don't manage to do. We have been working together for quite some time now in big partnerships, and the global situation has not improved that much. I think there is an aspect here of different roles and responsibilities that we will need to identify better in the future. And I am very happy also that Octavi has brought up the very important role that communities are playing in substituting the public service delivery. But I also think we need to look at it from another aspect and make sure that when we support those communities, we also equally support the local government so that there is a balance there in the way that they can provide self-determination on how they can get organized and the type of livelihoods that they need to co-create. I think co-creation plays a very important role here.